The night my husband's family humiliated me for the last time, his mother had already packed my suitcase. She placed it beside the front door before dinner, like I was not a daughter-in-law, not a wife, not a human being with feelings, but a problem they had finally decided to remove. My father-in-law sat at the head of the table, refusing to look at me. My sister-in-law whispered something and laughed. And my husband, Daniel, stood in the hallway with his face pale, caught between the woman he married and the family that raised him. Then his mother looked at me and said, "A woman who cannot give this family a child has no place in this house." The whole room went silent. My hands were shaking under the table, not because I was weak, but because inside my purse, folded between two medical papers, was the doctor's report they had no idea existed. A report I had been too scared to show. A report that would change every face in that room. I slowly reached into my bag, placed the paper on the table, and said, "Before you throw me out, maybe you should read what the doctor wrote." My mother-in-law smiled, thinking she had already won. Then Daniel picked up the report. His eyes moved across the first line, and in that moment, his whole family finally learned the truth. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to the channel for more emotional revenge and betrayal stories where quiet people finally get heard, lies lose their power, and the truth arrives at exactly the right time. My name is Ava, and this is the story of how my husband's family tried to break me, until one doctor's report exposed everything. 2. The marriage I thought would save me. When I married Daniel Carter, I believed I was not just marrying a man. I believed I was joining a family. That was my first mistake. Daniel was kind when I met him, soft-spoken, responsible, the kind of man who noticed small things. If I was quiet, he asked why. If I looked tired, he brought me tea. If I felt nervous, he held my hand under the table and squeezed it gently, like he was promising without words that I was safe. We met at a charity event where I was helping organize donated books for children. Daniel was there with his company, carrying boxes and a shirt that was too expensive for that kind of work. I teased him about it, and he laughed like he had been waiting all day for someone to make him feel normal. He asked me out 2 weeks later. 6 months after that, he told me he loved me. And 1 year later, he asked me to marry him in a small garden behind the restaurant where we had our first dinner. I said yes before he finished the question. I did not come from a big family. My parents had both passed away by the time I was 26. I had an aunt who lived far away, a few close friends, and a quiet apartment filled with books, plants, and old photographs. So when Daniel brought me home to meet his family, I wanted them to like me more than I wanted to admit. His mother, Margaret Carter, opened the door wearing pearls and a smile that did not reach her eyes. "So this is Ava," she said. "Not welcome, not, 'We've heard so much about you.' Just, 'So this is Ava.'" His father, Richard, shook my hand and said, "Daniel has always had unusual taste." I laughed politely because I thought he was joking. He was not. Daniel's younger sister, Chloe, looked me up and down and said, "You're prettier than I expected." At the time, I thought that was a compliment. Later, I learned that in the Carter house, insults often wore perfume. During dinner, Margaret asked me about my job, my family, my savings, my cooking, and whether I wanted children. Not in a warm way, in an interview way. I answered everything carefully. Yes, I worked as an administrative coordinator at a medical office. Yes, I knew how to cook. Yes, I wanted children one day. And yes, I understood how important family was. Margaret smiled when I said that. "Good," she said, "because in this family, women know how to keep a home together." I looked at Daniel. He smiled nervously, like his mother was simply old-fashioned. I told myself I could handle old-fashioned. I did not know old-fashioned could become cruel when it was given enough power. 3. Living under their roof. After the wedding, Daniel and I moved into the guest wing of his parents' house. It was supposed to be temporary. That was what Daniel told me. "My parents have plenty of space," he said. "We can save money for our own home. Just 1 year, Ava. Maybe less." I did not love the idea, but I loved him, and I wanted to start our marriage in peace, so I agreed. At first, I tried very hard to be the perfect daughter-in-law. I woke up early. I helped Margaret in the kitchen. I kept our rooms spotless. I remembered birthdays, anniversaries, family traditions, and even the way Richard liked his coffee. But nothing was ever enough. If I cooked dinner, Margaret said it had too little salt. If I cleaned, Chloe said I was trying too hard. If I wore makeup, I was showing off. If I did not, I was letting myself go. If Daniel helped me carry groceries, Margaret said, "Ava, don't turn my son into your servant." If I carried everything myself, she said, "You always look like you want pity." I began to understand that in that house, I was not being judged by what I did. I was being judged for existing. Daniel saw some of it. Not all. At least that is what I told myself. When his mother made a sharp comment, he would say later, "She doesn't mean it like that." When Chloe laughed at me, he would say, "She jokes with everyone." When Richard dismissed me at dinner, he would say, "Dad is just quiet." I wanted to believe him, because believing him was easier than admitting I had married into a family that only tolerated me because Daniel wanted me there. Then the baby questions started. At first, they were gentle. "Any news yet? Are you two trying?" Daniel always loved children. Then they became sharper. "Maybe you should see a doctor. A wife has responsibilities. Daniel is not getting younger." We had only been married 8 months when Margaret started leaving baby magazines on the kitchen counter. By our first anniversary, she had begun mentioning other women. Emily got pregnant after 3 months of marriage. Mrs. Allen's daughter-in-law gave them twins. Some women are naturally made for motherhood. She never said I was not. She did not have to. The message was sitting between every word. Daniel and I had talked about children. We wanted them. But the pressure made something beautiful feel like a test I was failing every month. Each time I was not pregnant, I felt grief. And then I felt shame for feeling grief. Then I felt anger because Margaret acted like my body was family property she was waiting to inspect. One night, after dinner, she said it directly. "Ava, you should understand something. Daniel is our only son. This family needs an heir." I looked at Daniel. He stared at his plate. That silence hurt more than his mother's words, because sometimes betrayal does not begin with someone speaking against you. Sometimes it begins with the person who should defend you choosing silence. 4. The humiliation became public. After 2 years of marriage, the pressure turned into humiliation. Margaret stopped pretending. At family gatherings, she made comments loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ava is still adjusting to married life. Ava has delicate health. Ava and Daniel are taking their time, though I don't know how much time some people need." Chloe was worse because she smiled while hurting me. One Sunday afternoon, during a family lunch, she looked at my plate and said, "Maybe eat more greens, Ava. People say that helps women who struggle." Everyone went quiet. My face burned. Daniel looked uncomfortable but said nothing. I stood up and went to the bathroom. I locked the door and gripped the sink until my hands stopped shaking. When I came back, Margaret looked at me and sighed. "There's no need to be dramatic." That word became their favorite. Dramatic. If I cried, I was dramatic. If I defended myself, I was dramatic. If I stayed quiet, I was sulking. They put me in a box where every reaction became proof that I was the problem. Then Richard began talking to Daniel privately. I would hear their voices behind closed doors. "You have to think about your future. A man needs a stable home. Love is not enough if a marriage brings no legacy." Legacy. He said it like I was a broken chair in the wrong room. One evening, I heard Margaret speaking to Daniel in the sitting room. I had gone downstairs to get water and stopped when I heard my name. "She is making you smaller," Margaret said. Daniel replied, "Mom, stop." "No, you stop. You work all day. You come home to a wife who gives you nothing but tension. No child, no joy, no peace." My hand tightened around the glass. Daniel said nothing. Margaret lowered her voice. There are women who would be grateful to be your wife. I knew who she meant. Emily, a family friend, polished, wealthy, divorced, and always available whenever Margaret invited her. Emily smiled at Daniel too much. Margaret smiled at Emily too warmly. And suddenly I understood. They were not just disappointed in me. They were making room for someone else. 5. The secret I was afraid to share. The week I found out I was pregnant, I was alone. Daniel was at work. Margaret was at a charity lunch. Richard was at his club. Chloe was probably somewhere taking pictures of coffee and pretending it was a personality. I had been feeling sick for days, tired, dizzy, emotional. At first, I thought it was stress. Then I took a test. When the second line appeared, I sat on the bathroom floor and stared at it. I did not move. I did not breathe properly. I just stared. Then I started crying. Not because I was unhappy, because I was terrified. For 2 years, they had made motherhood feel like a courtroom. Now that I had the answer they claimed to want, I did not feel safe enough to celebrate it. That is what cruelty does. It can make even good news feel dangerous. I made an appointment at the clinic where I worked. I did not want special treatment, so I booked quietly with Dr. Patel, one of the physicians I trusted most. She confirmed it. 6 weeks pregnant. Very early. She smiled and said, "Congratulations, Ava." The word felt strange. Congratulations. I had been waiting so long to hear it, but I felt tears slipping down my face. Dr. Patel's smile faded. "Are you safe at home?" That question broke something inside me. I told her more than I planned. Not everything, but enough. The pressure, the humiliation, the comments, the way Daniel stayed silent, the stress, the fear that if I told them too soon, they would suddenly act loving, not because they loved me, but because they loved what I carried. Dr. Patel listened carefully. Then she said, "This is your medical information. You decide when and how to share it. But Ava, stress matters. You need support, not pressure." She printed my report and gave me instructions. Rest. Follow-up appointment. Prenatal vitamins. Avoid unnecessary stress. At the bottom of the report, she had written a note. Patient is approximately 6 weeks pregnant. Emotional stress should be minimized. Supportive environment recommended. I folded the report and placed it in my purse. I planned to tell Daniel that night. I really did. But when he came home, he was angry. Not at me at first. At work. At traffic. At his father. At something. Then Margaret came in and told him Emily had called. "Such a sweet girl," she said. "She asked about you." I watched Daniel's face. He looked away, and suddenly the words got stuck in my throat. I wanted to tell him he was going to be a father, but I needed to know if he was still my husband first. So I waited. 1 day became 2. 2 became 5. And in those 5 days, everything fell apart. 6. Their plan to remove me. The morning it happened, I found my suitcase in the hallway. At first, I thought Daniel had taken it out for storage. Then I saw my clothes inside, folded badly. Some of my books were in a box. My mother's photo frame was wrapped in a towel. I stood there staring. Margaret walked out of the dining room holding a cup of tea. "Oh," she said. "You found it." My voice came out small. "What is this?" She looked almost pleased. "A practical step." I looked behind her, hoping Daniel would appear and tell me there had been a mistake. But he did not. Richard came out next, adjusting his watch. Chloe followed, holding her phone, looking excited in a quiet, ugly way. Margaret placed her cup down. "Ava, this arrangement is no longer working." I blinked. "Arrangement?" "You and Daniel living here, this marriage, all of it." My chest tightened. "You packed my things?" "Only some. You can collect the rest later." I looked at Richard. He did not meet my eyes. Chloe said, "Don't make this messy." Messy. My life was being packed into a suitcase, and I was being asked not to make it messy. "Where is Daniel?" I asked. Margaret's expression changed. "He is at work. We thought it would be better to do this without upsetting him." I almost laughed. Without upsetting him. They were throwing out his wife without him present, and somehow he was the one being protected. Margaret continued. "You can stay with a friend for a while. Daniel needs space to think." Did he ask for this? No one answered. That was an answer. I felt the doctor's report in my purse like it was burning through the fabric. But I did not take it out yet. Not because I wanted to hide, because I wanted to know how far they would go. Margaret stepped closer. "Ava, you are not a bad person, but you are not right for this family." My voice shook. "Because I'm not pregnant?" She sighed. "Because you bring sadness into this house. Daniel deserves joy. He deserves children. He deserves a wife who can build a future with him." Chloe added, "And honestly, everyone can see he is miserable." That one hit me. Because I knew Daniel had been distant, but hearing them use his sadness as a weapon against me felt like being pushed while already standing on the edge. Then the front door opened. Daniel walked in. He stopped when he saw the suitcase. His eyes moved from the suitcase to me, then to his mother. "What's going on?" he asked. Margaret's voice softened immediately. "Daniel, we were trying to help you." He stared at the suitcase. "By packing my wife's clothes?" Richard cleared his throat. "Son, this has gone on long enough." Daniel looked at me. I waited. This was the moment. The moment I needed him to choose. Not perfectly, not loudly, just clearly. Margaret touched his arm. "You need peace, Daniel. You need a future. Ava cannot give you that." Daniel closed his eyes. And for one terrible second, I thought he would say nothing again. Then Chloe said, "Besides, Emily called. She said she'd come over if you needed someone to talk to." That was when I finally understood. This was not a conversation. It was a replacement plan. 7. The dinner of humiliation. Daniel did not let them throw me out that morning. But he also did not stop the war. He told everyone to calm down. He told me to go upstairs. He told his mother they would talk later. Talk later. That phrase felt like a locked door. I went to our room and sat on the edge of the bed with my purse in my lap. The report was still inside. I could have shown him then. I could have ended it. But something inside me was tired of begging for basic decency. I did not want him to defend me because I was pregnant. I wanted to know if he would defend me because I was his wife. That evening, Margaret announced a family dinner. Not asked. Announced. "Everyone should sit down and speak honestly," she said. Honestly. In that house, honesty meant everyone telling me what was wrong with me, while I was expected to listen quietly. At 7 o'clock, we gathered in the dining room. The suitcase was still by the front door. She had left it there on purpose. A symbol. A warning. Richard sat at the head of the table. Margaret sat beside him. Chloe sat across from me. Daniel sat next to me, tense and silent. Then Emily arrived. Yes. Emily. She walked in wearing a cream dress and carrying a bottle of wine. I looked at Daniel. He looked shocked. Good. At least he had not known that part. Margaret smiled as if this was normal. Emily was nearby. I thought she could join us. I stared at the table. Suddenly, everything was clear. They wanted to humiliate me badly enough that I would leave on my own. Dinner began. No one ate much. Then Margaret placed her fork down. "Ava, we need to discuss your role in this family." Daniel said, "Mom, don't." She ignored him. "You have been married to my son for 2 years. In that time, he has become unhappy, withdrawn, and burdened. A wife should bring light into a man's life, not heaviness." My hands tightened in my lap. Richard added, "This family has expectations." Chloe leaned back. "And let's not pretend the baby issue doesn't matter." Daniel stood up. "Enough." But Margaret stood too. "No, Daniel. Someone has to say what everyone knows. Ava cannot give this family what it needs. The room went quiet. Emily looked uncomfortable now. Maybe she had expected tension, not cruelty. Margaret turned to me. A woman who cannot give this family a child has no place in this house. There it was, the sentence from the hook. The sentence that finally broke the last thread of patience inside me. I looked at Daniel. His face was pale. He whispered, "Ava." But I was not looking for permission anymore. I reached into my purse. Margaret watched with a cold little smile, like she expected me to pull out tissues and cry. Instead, I pulled out the doctor's report. I placed it in the center of the table. "Before you throw me out," I said quietly, "maybe you should read what the doctor wrote." 8. The doctor's report exposed everything. No one moved at first. The report sat on the table between the candles and the untouched plates. Margaret looked annoyed. "What is that supposed to be?" "My medical report." Chloe rolled her eyes. "Oh, now she has a report." Daniel reached for it first. His hands were shaking when he unfolded the paper. I watched his eyes move across the top. Patient name, Ava Carter. Date, clinic. Then the line, approximately 6 weeks pregnant. Daniel stopped breathing. His face changed so quickly that Margaret leaned forward. "What does it say?" Daniel did not answer. He read the next line. Emotional stress should be minimized. Supportive environment recommended. His eyes filled with tears. "Ava," he whispered. Margaret snatched the paper from his hand. She read it. Her face froze. Then Richard took it. Then Chloe leaned over his shoulder. Emily covered her mouth. For the first time since I entered that family, no one had anything to say. The woman they called useless was pregnant. The wife they packed a suitcase for was carrying the child they claimed to want. The person they accused of bringing sadness into the house had been carrying fear, stress, and their grandchild while they plotted to remove her. Margaret's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "You should have told us," she said. I laughed once. It came out broken. "Told you? You packed my suitcase this morning." Her face reddened. "We didn't know." "That's the point," I said. "You didn't know, and you still thought cruelty was acceptable." Daniel stood slowly. He looked at his mother. "You did this while she was pregnant." Margaret's voice shook. "We didn't know, Daniel." He shook his head. "No, you did it while she was my wife. That should have been enough." Those words hit me so hard I almost cried. That was all I had wanted. Not protection because of a baby. Protection because I mattered. Daniel turned to Richard. "And you let this happen." Richard looked ashamed. Chloe crossed her arms, but her eyes were wet. Margaret tried again. "Ava, dear, emotions are high. We can fix this." Dear. She had never called me dear unless guests were watching. I looked at her. "No, Margaret. You don't get to fix this because now the report says something you like." The room went still. I picked up the paper and folded it carefully. Then I stood. Daniel reached for my hand. "Ava, please." I looked at him. "I needed you before the report." His face broke. "I know. I needed you when they called me dramatic. I needed you when your mother blamed me. I needed you when your sister laughed. I needed you when your father talked about legacy like I was a failed investment." Tears slipped down his face. "I know," he said again. "And now I need space." Margaret gasped. "You can't leave now." I turned to her. "You were happy to send me away this morning." She had no answer. I walked to the front door. I picked up the suitcase they had packed for me. Then I looked back at the family that had tried to erase me. "This is the first useful thing you've done for me all day," I said. And I left. 9. The silence after leaving. I stayed at a small hotel that night. Not with a friend, not with family. Alone. I needed one night where no one told me what to feel. I sat on the bed with my suitcase open beside me. My clothes were wrinkled. My mother's photo frame was cracked from the way Chloe had packed it. I held the frame and cried harder than I had cried in years. Not because I was weak, because I was tired. Tired of being judged, tired of being polite, tired of waiting for love to act like love. Daniel called 37 times. I did not answer. Then he texted, "Ava, I am sorry." Then, "I failed you." Then, "I am outside the hotel. I won't come in unless you ask me to. I just need to know you are safe." I looked out the window. His car was across the parking lot. He was standing beside it, coat pulled tight around him, looking up at the building like a man who had finally understood the cost of silence. I did not go down, but I texted back, "I am safe. Go home." He replied, "That house is not home without you." I wanted to believe him, but I had believed words before. The next morning, Dr. Patel called to check on me. I told her I was safe. She reminded me to rest, eat, breathe, and decide slowly. "Do not let panic make your next choice," she said. That became my rule. Do not decide from panic. So I did not run back. And I did not file for divorce immediately. I waited. I watched. Because apologies are easy when people are scared. Change is harder when the fear fades. Over the next week, Daniel came to see me every day. At first, I refused to meet him. Then I agreed to talk in the hotel lobby. He looked exhausted. No polished excuses, no defensive tone, just shame. "I told them to stop," he said. "But you didn't make them stop." He nodded. "I know. You let me become the price of keeping peace with your family." His eyes filled. "I know. Stop saying you know unless you're going to do something with it." That silenced him. Then he took out a key and placed it on the table. I frowned. "What is that?" "Our new apartment." I stared at him. He swallowed. "I signed the lease yesterday. Not for you to come back because you're pregnant. Not because of the baby. Because I should have taken you out of that house a long time ago." My heart moved before I wanted it to. He continued. "I told my parents we are moving out. I told my mother she will not be involved in your medical appointments unless you invite her. I told Chloe she owes you an apology before she is allowed near you. And I told my father that if he ever speaks about you like a failed duty again, he won't hear from me." I looked at him carefully. "And Emily?" His face tightened. "I called her. I apologized for my mother dragging her into our marriage. I told her there is no place for her in my life." I wanted to cry, but I had cried enough. So I said, "That is a start." He nodded. "I know." This time the words sounded different. Not like an excuse, like responsibility. 10. The apology that came too late. Margaret tried to visit me 3 days later. She arrived at the hotel with flowers, a gift bag, and a face full of panic, dressed up as love. The front desk called my room. "There is a Mrs. Carter here to see you." I almost said no. Then I remembered Dr. Patel's rule. Do not decide from panic. So I met her in the lobby. She stood when she saw me. For the first time, she looked nervous. "Ava," she said softly. I stayed standing. She held out the flowers. I did not take them. Her smile trembled. I wanted to apologize. I waited. She swallowed. "I said things I should not have said." "That is not an apology." Her eyes widened slightly. I said, "That is a sentence about your discomfort." Her face changed. Maybe no one had ever spoken to Margaret Carter that way. Good. It was overdue. I continued. "Try again." She lowered the flowers. For a moment I thought she would leave. Then her shoulders dropped. "I was cruel to you," she said. "I judged you. I blamed you for something that was never mine to judge. I tried to push you out of your marriage because I wanted control over my son's life. That was better. Still not enough. But better." I looked at the flowers. "Are you apologizing because you hurt me, or because I'm pregnant?" Her eyes filled. The question found the truth before she could hide it. At first, she whispered, because of the baby. I nodded slowly. Of course. But now, she added, because Daniel looked at me like he did not know me, and I realized maybe he was finally seeing me clearly. A tear slipped down her cheek. I don't like what he saw. I believed that. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But belief. I said, you do not get access to my child by pretending the past did not happen. She flinched. My child will not be used as a reward for your apology. She nodded. I understand. I don't think you do. But maybe you can learn. She wiped her face. Will you come home? I looked at her. No. Her face fell. Daniel and I are moving into our own apartment. She closed her eyes. I see. No, Margaret, you don't, but you will. She nodded again, smaller this time. When she left, she took the flowers with her. I was glad. Some flowers are just guilt with petals. 11. Building a new home. 2 weeks later, I moved into the apartment with Daniel. Not back into his parents' house, into our own home. It was small, 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, a balcony that looked over the street. The bathroom sink leaked, and the living room had terrible lighting. But it was ours. No Margaret opening doors without knocking. No Chloe laughing from the hallway. No Richard measuring my worth over dinner. Just quiet. For the first few nights, Daniel slept on the couch. Not because I demanded it, because he said trust needed room. Every morning he made breakfast before work. Every evening he came home and asked, "What do you need?" At first I hated that question, because I did not know how to answer it without feeling like a burden. Then slowly I learned. I need quiet. I need soup. I need you to call the clinic and confirm the appointment. I need you to sit beside me and not talk. He did all of it. He came to every doctor appointment, not as the proud son of the Carter family, as my husband. Dr. Patel watched him carefully the first time. I could tell. She asked me if I felt safe speaking freely. Daniel looked hurt for half a second. Then he stepped out without being asked. That mattered. A man who truly wants to change does not get offended by the boundaries his silence created. He respects them. When Chloe finally apologized, it was over text. I did not answer. Then she sent a voice note. I did not listen. Then one afternoon, she came to the apartment and stood outside the door with a small box. Daniel asked if I wanted him to send her away. I said no. Chloe looked different without her sharp smile. I was horrible to you, she said. Yes. She swallowed. I thought if Mom liked me more, I would feel important. So I copied her, even when I knew it was wrong. I said nothing. She handed me the box. Inside was my mother's photo frame, repaired. I broke it when I packed your things, she said. I'm sorry. That one hurt, because I had wondered. I took the frame. Thank you. She looked hopeful. I added, this does not fix everything. Her face fell, but she nodded. I know. Good. They were all learning those 2 words. I know. But now they had to live differently after saying them. 12. The day they saw the baby. 3 months later, Daniel and I invited his family to meet us at a small restaurant. Neutral place. Public. Safe. I was showing by then. Not much, but enough. Margaret cried when she saw me. Not loudly, just one hand over her mouth, eyes full. Richard looked ashamed and proud at the same time. Chloe brought a small gift bag and asked before touching my arm. That mattered too. Permission. Something they had never believed I deserved before. Daniel held my hand under the table. Not secretly, clearly. When Margaret asked about the baby, I answered what I wanted and kept private what I did not. She started to ask about the nursery, then stopped herself. May I ask? She said. That was the first sign I had been waiting for. May I? I nodded. You may. She smiled through tears. The dinner was not perfect. Nothing about healing is perfect. Richard still said one awkward thing about the Carter name, and Daniel gave him a look so sharp that Richard immediately corrected himself. Chloe tried too hard. Margaret cried too much. But nobody insulted me. Nobody dismissed me. Nobody treated my body like family property. And when dessert came, Daniel raised his glass. "I want to say something," he said. My body tensed out of habit. He felt it and squeezed my hand. He looked at his family. "I failed my wife by being quiet when I should have been brave. I allowed peace in this family to matter more than peace in my marriage. I can't undo that. But I can make sure it never happens again." The table was silent. Then he turned to me. "Ava, you and our child are not part of my family because they accept you. You are my family because I chose you." I cried then. Not because everything was fixed, because something true had finally been said in front of everyone. Margaret whispered, "We're sorry, Ava." This time I did not say it was okay, because it was not okay. Instead, I said, "I hope you mean it long enough to change." She nodded. "We will try." That was all I needed from them at that moment. Not perfection. Trying. Real trying. 13. Ending. What the report really exposed. People think the doctor's report exposed my pregnancy. And yes, it did. It exposed the truth they did not know. It exposed that while they were calling me useless, I was carrying the very future they claimed to care about. It exposed that while they were packing my suitcase, my body was already carrying a new life. But the report exposed something else too. Something deeper. It exposed their hearts. It showed that Margaret's love was conditional. It showed that Richard's idea of legacy had made him cruel. It showed that Chloe had learned how to hurt people to feel powerful. And it showed Daniel that silence can become betrayal when it stands beside cruelty and does nothing. Most of all, it exposed me to myself. I learned that I was not weak for crying. I was not dramatic for hurting. I was not ungrateful for wanting respect. And I was not required to stay in a house where people only valued me after a medical report proved I was useful to them. My child would not grow up in that kind of love. A love that measures. A love that humiliates. A love that only opens the door after it sees what it can gain. No. My child would grow up knowing that dignity comes before approval. That kindness is not weakness. That family is not just blood or name or tradition. Family is who protects your heart when you are not useful to them. Daniel and I still had work to do. Trust did not return in one day. It returned slowly. In every appointment he attended, every boundary he respected, every time he chose me before I had to ask. As for his family, I let them earn their way back slowly. Not because the baby needed grandparents at any cost, but because people can change when guilt becomes honesty and honesty becomes action. But I never forgot that dinner. The suitcase by the door, the cream dress Emily wore, Margaret's cold voice, Daniel's pale face, the report on the table, and the silence after they read it. That silence was the sound of every cruel word coming back to its owner. My husband's family humiliated me. They judged me. They tried to remove me. They said I had no place in their house. Then the doctor's report exposed everything. But by then, I had already learned the truth that mattered most. I did not need a place in their house. I needed peace in my own life. And once I chose that peace, no one could pack it into a suitcase and throw it by the door again. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotional betrayal and revenge stories where quiet people finally get heard, the truth comes out, and dignity wins in the end.